So, let's talk about Finnegans Wake. You know, James Joyce's famously, well, impossible book. It's legendary for being one of the toughest reads out there. But what if I told you we could crack open some of its biggest secrets just by looking at one single conversation? A conversation that sounds like complete gibberish at first. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do in this explainer. We're diving deep into the very first real dialogue in the book between two guys known as Mutt and Jute. And hey, welcome to the episode 5 summary from our podcast Reading Finnegans Wake in 200 sessions, where we do exactly that. We analyze this incredible book 3 pages at a time. If you like what you see, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. It really helps us out. Okay, let's get back to the puzzle. The whole conversation kicks off with this. I mean, what even is that? What a queer sort of a mahan. It is evident the mission dotty. It sounds like total nonsense, right? Well, this is our challenge. And to even begin to solve it, we need to understand the secret rulebook Joyce is using for the entire novel.
And that rulebook, it comes from an Italian philosopher, Giambattista Vico. See, Vico had this idea that history isn't a straight line. It's not this constant march of progress. Nope, for him, it moves in these huge repeating cycles. You start with a divine age of gods, then a heroic age of aristocrats, and finally a human age of democracy. And then, boof, the whole thing collapses and the loop starts all over again. This idea of recirculation is, without a doubt, the absolute bedrock of Finnegans Wake.
And Joyce, being Joyce, builds this theory right into the architecture of the book. I mean, literally. It starts in the middle of a sentence with the word river run. And then hundreds of pages later, when you get to the very last page, it ends with the first half of that exact same sentence. It's a perfect circle. The end literally plugs back into the beginning, which means you could, in theory, read it forever. There's no escaping the cycle. So how do you know when a new cycle begins? Well, Joyce gives us these 10 massive, 100-letter thunder words. Seriously, look at this thing. They're these giant mashups of the word for thunder in dozens of languages. They represent a huge thunderclap from the heavens that signals a fall, you know, like the fall of Adam or Humpty Dumpty, and it kicks off the whole loop of history all over again.
Okay, so with that big idea in mind, the cycles, the thunder, let's finally meet our characters. Imagine we're on a shore near Dublin, thousands of years ago, right at the dawn of a brand new cycle.
This is how we see things, through Mutt's eyes. He spots this strange figure, a carl, which is like an old word for a churl or a peasant, on a little hill. The guy's dressed in animal skins, totally alone, and Mutt's just thinking, you know, who the bugger is he? He sees this almost Neanderthal-like man drinking from a skull. It's a picture of a truly primitive human, right at the beginning of consciousness.
Now, these two aren't just characters, they're archetypes. They're bigger than themselves. Mutt is the curious one, the local guy, and he has a stutter. He represents a figure called Shem, who's sort of the artist type in the book. Jute, on the other hand, is the gruff, grunting invader. He represents Sean, the man of action, the soldier. So what we're seeing is this fundamental, ancient conflict playing out. Native versus invader, artist versus soldier, brother versus brother. So, how on earth do these two even talk to each other? Well, this is where it gets really clever, because their apparent failure to communicate is exactly where Joyce hides all the meaning.
Jute grunts at Mutt, "Are you Jeff?" And Mutt replies, "No, only an utterer. I became a stummer." At first glance, it just looks like a silly misunderstanding. But come on, this is Joyce. Nothing is ever that simple.
Let's unpack these words, because each one is like a little linguistic trapdoor. Jeff isn't a name, it's a pun on death. An utterer isn't just someone who speaks, it's old slang for a counterfeiter, someone passing fake money. And stummer isn't just a stutter, it's also the German word for a mute person. But here's the real key, the stutter itself. It connects all the way back to Vico's theory that the first men stuttered to imitate thunder, and all the way forward to a modern diagnosis of shell shock. This miscommunication is already screaming battle trauma at us. And it turns out, battle trauma is exactly what Mutt is suffering from. His stutter is a symptom of war. But which war are we talking about here?
When Jute asks him what caused his stutter, Mutt gives him this absolute gem of a line. "A put the bottle, sird."
This is the key that unlocks the whole thing. Bottle is a pun on both bottle, maybe from drinking, and battle. Sird sounds like sir, but it's also the Latin word for deaf. So when Mutt says a put the bottle sird, what he's really saying is it's about the battle, sir. But he's saying it to a man who is literally and figuratively deaf to history. It's just a perfect tragic image of trauma that can't be heard. So, what battle is it? Well, the main ghost haunting this conversation is the Battle of Clontarf, way back in 1014. It was this huge, defining moment when Irish forces finally defeated the Vikings, right there on the Dublin shore. Mutt is constantly dropping hints, with puns like Dungtarf for Clontarf and Boohoohoo for the Irish king, Brian Boru, who won but was killed.
But here's the classic Joyce move. He never just sticks to one thing. He layers the Battle of Clontarf with another conflict from the Cromwellian era, and even with World War I. And you have to ask, why do that? Because for Joyce, all of human history is one single recurring wound. The uniforms change, the weapons get deadlier, but the battle is always the same, just playing out over and over again in Vico's great cycle.
And this all builds to this incredibly powerful and kind of haunting theme, the idea that the very ground they're standing on is a graveyard of all that history.
Mutt's speech builds and builds to this incredible climax. He says that everyone who fought is now tombed to the mound, ashes to ashes, Erde from Erde, that's German for earth from earth, in what he calls this sound cemetery, which is Liebes love.
Just look at that one word, cemetery. It's an absolute masterpiece. I mean, yes, it's the cemetery, but it's also a place where you can see the past, where you can sound out its echoes, and it all happens by the sea. It's a place where opposites totally merge, where Liebes love smashes together the German word for love with Wagner's famous love-death aria from his opera.
And that, right there, is the ultimate point of the whole exchange. The Dublin landscape isn't just a backdrop, it's a giant burial mound, a how. It literally contains the dust and the stories of every single person, invader and native, every battle, every love, every death that ever happened there. History isn't something you read in a book, it's the ground right under your feet.
So this really short, incredibly dense little dialogue is like a perfect miniature version of the entire book. It shows us how language, history, and myth are all buried together in the same soil, just waiting for a reader to come along and dig them up. And that leaves us with some pretty big questions to chew on.
Here's one for you. Why is it a stutter, a breakdown of language, that becomes the very key to unlocking the trauma of history? What does it mean when the past can only speak to us through broken words?
And think about this. How does he pull it off? How does he manage to pack the entire repeating cycle of human conflict, from ancient tribal warfare all the way to modern shell shock, into this one fragmented chat between two Stone Age guys on a beach?
Those are the kinds of rabbit holes we love to go down. For a much more detailed analysis, you've got to check out the Reading Finnegans Wake in 200 Sessions podcast. We really do go through this book 3 pages at a time. It's quite a journey. And don't forget to visit the finneganswakenotes.com website for even more detailed line-by-line explanations and notes. Thanks for joining me for this one.